Hey listeners, it's your host Dacia. I kind of have a cold. Sorry, I'm snuffly. But what I'm not sorry about is this episode that you're about to listen to with Anne Akiko Meyers, who was just lovely to talk to. And she taught me things about Leonard Bernstein that I did not even know that I needed to know. And she'll do the same for you. I hope you enjoy the episode. Also, since you're probably sitting there at your computer, why don't you go ahead and go to the iTunes and subscribe to us and rate and review us. And thank you to all of you who already have. You've said the loveliest things. I feel so lucky to have such awesome listeners. Anyway, before I emote anymore, I'm going to go. Enjoy the episode. My name is Dacia Clay. I'm the audio librarian here at Classical 91.7. While I'm a real librarian, I have a deep, dark secret. I know very little about classical music. I grew up listening to rock, and I know something about jazz. But when it comes to classical, but I really want to learn. So, every week on this show, a classical music expert will give me a piece of classical music they think I should know, and then we'll discuss it. Come learn with me in the classical classroom. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Classical Classroom. I'm Dacia Clay, and here with me today from actually not that far away, just at the studios of KMFA in Austin, is Anne Akiko Meyers. She is a world-renowned violinist who's been touring like crazy for the past 30 years. She's released, I believe, 32 albums. She is a big fan of living composers and has commissioned lots of work from the likes of people like Jennifer Higdon and Wynton Marsalis to compose pieces for violin. She's actually commissioned 7 composers for her new CD called Serenade. Also, I thought this was cool, she's been on The Good Wife, The Tonight Show, and on Morning Edition and All Things Considered. Anne Akiko Meyers, welcome to the Classical Classroom.
Thank you very much, Dacia.
How's the weather there in Austin today? Would you describe it as hot or extra hot?
Extra hot and spicy.
Yeah. I know what that's like. It's like Houston, but slightly less wet. Yeah. Well, let's get right to talking about the music on your new CD, which is, it seems like you started the sort of concept for the CD. It was sort of born out of a Leonard Bernstein piece.
Yes, so I really wanted to celebrate Leonard Bernstein's upcoming 100th birthday and put a spotlight on one of his lesser-known works, but in my opinion, strongest compositions that he wrote, and that's the Serenade.
Yeah.
And the concerto goes in 5 movements. The entrance of the concerto is one of the most arresting proclamations for violin, in that it starts completely solo, naked. The violin is just a cappella. And then it brings up the orchestra in a giant sweep up to the high stratospherically high, the tippy end of the fingerboard A note. And that just creates this dialogue, like we're off to the races, we're off discussing everything about love.
Yeah.
It's based on a raucous dinner party that 7 Greek philosophers had, talking about all the different dimensions of love, and also praising the god of love, Eros. And this book was very influential in the music and to Leonard Bernstein, who at that time was very conflicted about his sexuality and being married to essentially his muse, but yet being gay, and the incredible amount of guilt that he felt over that.
Oh my gosh, I did not know that Bernstein was gay. How did I miss that? That's really interesting. And so he was sort of grappling with those issues.
Yes, he was grappling with a lot of conflicts, and yet he was at the height of his creative powers when he wrote this concerto, and had to basically give up composition to run the New York Philharmonic. He was the conductor of the New York Philharmonic after, I think, from 1957. And this concerto was written in 1954.
So there are Greek philosophers involved in this piece, and I want to say that strikes me as very Bernstein. But I don't know why. I mean, I actually don't know that much about him. He just seems like he was a very eccentric, interesting, smart person.
Yes, for sure. I mean, he was a very thoughtful, probing artist who really looked for answers in the symposium, and actually originally titled the concerto Symposium, but changed it and regretted that change later on.
Really?
Yeah. But the piece is such an incredibly complex work, but also incredibly lyrical, and has great moments of tenderness and of tragedy, of kind of a sparring quality, like in the third movement. It's perpetual motion between orchestra and violinist, and you essentially are almost just jumping off of a cliff and hoping to meet the orchestra at the end of it.
So I'm interested in Bernstein. You said that he actually gave up composing?
Yes, he had to. His time was just consumed by conducting, and he sadly had to give it up. But he was such a prolific composer, and he wrote musicals like Wonderful Town and Candide, West Side Story, which is also featured with the song Somewhere on this album, and it bookends the album.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the other songs in the album. They seem like you're drawing on the sort of American songbook. And I say that, but I have only a vague understanding of what the Great American Songbook is.
Yeah, so the American Songbook was really this incredibly rich time in American musical history from the 1920s through about the 1950s, where many songs were set to musicals or from film and for the stage. And, you have everything from Somewhere Over the Rainbow to I'll Be Seeing You, Wish Upon a Star, that was the Academy Award winner for Pinocchio in 1940, to Summertime by George Gershwin and Someone to Watch Over Me. Also, another incredibly haunting work is Laura by David Raksin, who composed that in 1944 for the film Laura. And there are like 400 versions of Laura. Everyone
Whoa.
from Frank Sinatra to Ella Fitzgerald would sing. And David Raksin was quite incredible. He was called the grandfather of film scores and wrote over 500 film scores. And he basically got a Dear John letter from his wife who left him. And the next day he wrote one of the most haunting pieces
Wow.
ever.
Well, can we talk a little bit and maybe hear some of the West Side Story, since the CD is bookended with that?
Yeah, one of the most beautiful pieces, Somewhere.
Yeah.
Somehow, someday, somewhere. It comes from actually a lot of the slow movement of Beethoven's Emperor Piano Concerto, which he took that refrain, and also Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake. You can hear
Really?
Somewhere in Swan Lake.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Those are sort of it's so well known in pop culture. I never would have thought to look for those composers inside of it.
That's what was also so fascinating, is like when you actually do the research and you find out that these songs all came from someplace, that was so much going on historically. It's so fascinating.
Yeah. The one other question that I had for you before I let you go is about the violin that you play on. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I play on a really beautiful Guarneri del Gesù that was made in 1741, and it's called the Ex Vieuxtemps, and it belonged to a really famous composer and concert violinist, Henry Vieuxtemps, who was a Belgian violinist in the 19th century. And he unfortunately suffered many strokes towards the end of his life, but he was so in love with this violin that he wanted to be buried with it.
Wow.
And this violin is really extraordinary because it has no sound post patch, which is totally common in almost every instrument out today. No cracks, no anything. It's just triple mint. Wow. And this helps the health of the violin tremendously, and it makes the sound project like none other. The violin was sitting actually under a bed for the last 50 years under a very discriminating philanthropist bed in London before he decided to put it on the market. And Guarneri del Gesù made only about 100 violins in his very short life, too. He died when he was 43 or 44 years old. So it's really, really rare to be able to perform on a violin of this quality because they're most of the time in museums or in patrons' hands.
Can you describe a little bit about what makes the sound of it special?
It has a really deep and rich G string. It almost sounds like a cello on the lower register. But at the same time, it has this incredibly reverberant and sonorous E string, which is so brilliant. And it's kind of like cathedral-like. And the overtones are just extraordinary on the violin. And there's just never a fear like I normally would have of being covered up by an orchestra. Like, this violin can absolutely cut through, 80 people sitting behind me.
Wow.
Like, no problem.
Yeah. Wow, that's very cool. I can tell when I listened to the CD, I thought that it had a very unique sound, and I can't tell if I was thinking that because I already kind of knew that it was a special violin. I'm not sure that my ears are that discerning, but I think it sounds special. Well, Anne Akiko Meyers, thank you so much for being on the Classical Classroom. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you.
Right, take care.
You too.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, everybody, that about does it for this episode of Classical Classroom. For more Classroom, go to houstonpublicmedia.org/classroom. Subscribe to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, what have you. But whatever you do, don't forget to rate and review us. Tell your friends and neighbors about us. You can follow us on Twitter and Tumblr, and now on our super cool YouTube channel, on which we will be putting some special video content soon. You can also email me at dclay@houstonpublicmedia.org. Thanks to audio producer Todd, Tickle Me Elmo, Hulslander for twiddling knobs. Thanks to program director St. John Flynn for carrying a man purse. Thanks to editor Mark DiClaudio for his piercing googly eyes. Thanks to Anne Akiko Meyers for being on this show. Thanks to me for saying words. But most of all, thanks to you for listening. We'll catch you next time.